Hello and welcome to This One Thing, a daily video devotional coming to you from First Presbyterian Church of Fort Lauderdale. And together we'll be looking at one text and choosing one thing for you to consider. And we hope that you find this a thought-provoking, encouraging part of your day. I woke up this morning, perhaps like you, my mind's still reviewing the events of this past week and the weekend, the protests and riots that had just occurred. And I decided to go on a run in order to clear my mind, to process, and if I'm honest, to forget. It just so happens that God had some other plans. You see, my running route was right down Las Olas Boulevard past Huizenga Park, where protests occurred yesterday, and as I ran, I passed some broken windows along Las Olas, military personnel deployed out there to guard against looting. I passed a garbage can that had a protester sign folded up and stuffed into the top of it. There were spent fireworks on the ground that had been used to agitate the police officers, and there were 2 gallons of milk sitting neatly by a garbage can that had been used to mitigate the burning effects of tear gas. You know, it was a little like seeing broken pieces of a balloon scattered about. You know that there had been a great bang at some point, but now all the pieces lay on the ground, innocent, lifeless. And as I ran, I pondered the cause. How did we get here? And if I stop at the answer, this protest or riot that happened last night, I think I know I missed the point. Martin Luther King Jr. on April 14th, 1967, speaking at Stanford University in his speech entitled "The Other America," said, "I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air, that certain conditions continue to exist in our society which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. Certain conditions must exist." Now, Dr. King said all of this in the context of condemning violence, of condemning riots, and promoting nonviolent resistance. But the reality is that there are certain conditions which must exist that lead to violent protests, irrespective of whether it is a helpful response or not. People do not tend toward riotous behavior naturally. Our text today comes from Matthew's Gospel in the 13th chapter. And here in this passage, the Gospel writer gives a series of Jesus' sayings which all focus on the value of the gospel message. And I want to read just one of them here. In verse 44, we hear, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has, and he buys that field." The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. And then in his joy, goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. And what is this treasure, this valuable truth that the writer speaks of, that is so valuable? It's that because of what God has done in Jesus Christ, we have a new covenant with God. It's the realization that he is our God and we are his people, as Jeremiah puts it. That I am not my own, that I belong to God. And this truth, this understanding of the grace provided in Jesus Christ frees me of all other belongings. It's that I'm no longer defined by my job or by my marriage or any other relationship, but rather simply in my belonging to God. I am a child of God. And here's the one thing, it's that when we arrive there, when we understand that we belong to God, that we are children of God, then we understand that we are all united in our oneness in God, with God, that we are God's children, all made of the same stuff. And so what do we do with that? In an op-ed in the LA Times on Saturday, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, former basketball player, wrote this. He said, "Racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible even if you're choking on it, until you let the sun in, and then you see it's everywhere. As long as we keep shining that light, we have a chance of cleaning it wherever it lands." Friends, I think for far too long we've kept it in the dark for myriad reasons, and as a member of the dominant culture, as a member of white America, I have a responsibility because I find myself as a gatekeeper in many instances, as a guardian of the light switch. I have a responsibility to keep the light on so that the racism can be seen and that with God's help it can be eradicated. Friends, whether we want it or not, we find ourselves as guardians of the light switch. And friends, we all belong to God. We are all made of the same stuff. And so we have this responsibility to one another. Be safe. Be well. Let's keep the light on.